My name is Fatima Shifa. On behalf of English Department of MES Mambad College, we are extremely delighted to introduce Dr. Simi Malhotra as the plenary speaker of Mesmac International Conferences. Dr. Simi Malhotra is a professor at the Central University of Jamia Millia Islamia and the director of Northeastern Studies and Policy Research. She has come here with a wealth of experience and knowledge in various realms of immense relevance, such as contemporary literary and cultural theory, post-theory, folk culture, Sikhism, and Northeastern studies. Thank you. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm profoundly delighted to welcome you on behalf of MES and Mesmac International Conferences. As far as I have understand, I know that you have come with a wealth of experience and knowledge in various realms of immense relevance, like contemporary literature and cultural theory, folk culture, Sikhism, and Northeastern studies. Let's have a fruitful and brief session. We would like to listen you. So shall we start? Ma'am, your impressive profile speaks a lot about you, that you are interested in various realms like Northeast studies and contemporary theory. Would you like to share some unique aspects about Northeastern studies?
We have a Center for Northeast Studies and Policy Research in Jamia Millia Islamia. This is the first Center for Northeast Studies anywhere in any central university, which was established in Jamia in 2012. And I've been associated with the center since 2017, and ever since 2017 we've started a research program on Northeast Studies, which is an MPhil PhD program. The idea was to pull together a lot of research which exists on Northeast Studies under one center, because we have a lot of people who work in sociology, in literature, in culture, in political science, in social work, in peace and conflict resolution. And so the idea was to bring all these researchers at one place and then have the possibility of a dialogue on that. So we do MPhil PhD program. We also conduct a lot of research programs and research projects in our center, which are funded by the Northeast Council, which falls under the Ministry of Dona. So, yeah.
What was your prime source of inspiration for research, and as well as are you researching on any new area of study?
Yeah, I was an undergraduate student in Delhi University, and then I was very fortunate to get through to an MA program in Jawaharlal Nehru University. And once you enter the MA program in JNU, there is no turning back. It changes you forever. I mean, anybody who's been to JNU will be able to bear with what I'm saying. And so, of course, the logical step after an MA was to do a PhD. And I started to teach in the University of Delhi, and then I've been in Jamia for the last 13 years or so. And this was my calling really in that sense. And I can say that I'm extremely indebted to not only for my undergraduate studies to Delhi University, and also where I had the fortune of teaching for less than a decade, but mostly to my alma mater, which is JNU, because it makes me who I am. And so therefore JNU has really shaped all my thoughts and ideas, my teachers, my peer group, the community of people that you see there. And also, of course, Jamia. I mean, I largely owe who I am also to my institution where I work. It has been the most rewarding experience to be at Jamia. I've learned so much at Jamia, and I deeply love my university, and I deeply love the universities that I've been part of. And so that's how I was shaped as an academic. As far as my current engagements are concerned, 2 of my books are currently under publication. So one of them has to do with food cultures in India, and the other which has to do with cyber culture in India. And both these book projects are roughly around culture studies. So this is what I'm looking at.
How does Northeastern studies engage with the questions of gender and performativity?
So, I mean, in Northeast societies, of course, gender per se is a very, very checkered kind of an idea, because what do we mean by gender? In that sense, but of course, gender has been an important concern for the Northeast. Recently, I had gone for a discussion on matrilineal in Khasi society, and while matrilineal is held up as a very important principle, but we see that in praxis a lot of ways in which matrilineal is also hemmed in Khasi society. Even though women are fairly empowered in those societies, they do get hemmed in by patriarchal structures. So if you look at, let's say, the Legislative Assembly in Meghalaya, you don't find women representatives. There are only 3. So in that sense, what might be there in the private sphere, whether it translates into empowering women into the public sphere, is something that needs to be also seen. So while there might be internal principles by which is not to say that matrilineal is not an empowering tool in Khasi society, but it's not enough. It does not do enough. So I think if one really needs to seek gender justice, then there is so much more work which needs to be done as far as Northeast is concerned. And this is just one example, but this is true of almost all societies in the Northeast.
As a professor from Jamia, how do you view the student uprising in JMI in connection with CAA and NRC?
Yeah, I think what one needs to understand is that students are thinking beings, and our universities are places where ideas need to be discussed and debated, and that is exactly what the students have been doing. After all, if it's not the young who will think about what's happening to the country, then who else will? So of course it's only natural that students should think about questions which are of importance not just to themselves but to all others. After all, we are the thinking group in some ways, and so universities are supposed to be places which do nurture all kinds of thinkings, all kinds of ideas in some way. So of course, if students in Jamia or students elsewhere, whether it's St. Stephen's or whether it's Indian Institute of Science or IITs or JNU or DU, are thinking about questions which have to do with citizenship, because citizenship is something which affects everybody, then it's only natural. It's only the job of students to think and to ideate and to reflect and to debate and to discuss, and so of course our students have been doing exactly the job that they're expected to do, and so and you'd be surprised at the kind of creative expression that one has seen from students, be it in terms of songs or in terms of slogans or in terms of paintings or in terms of exhibitions, and this is something which tells you about the health of a society, which is that the young people are thinking about their future, not just of themselves but also of the country, and so it's something which is very heartening for me as a teacher to see.
How do you view the folk culture from a postmodern perspective?
I think what has happened with postmodernity or with postmodernism is that because it gives a certain kind of a sanction to include all kinds of texts which were otherwise delegitimated and not studied, insofar as postmodernism allows you to be able to study those texts, I think it's very good, But at the same point of time, while we may engage with folk culture or folk forms, we need to also understand what do we mean by folk, because folk are people, and it's not that folk and people are museumized pieces, so it's not that they are ahistorical people who live at a certain historical point of time and we create museums out of those people and just showcase them and tokenistically just represent them and give them some sort of a almost ossified kind of an existence. Folk are moving people, folk are moving beings, and so of course as moving beings, their folk forms also transform, they also change, they also undergo transformations in some ways, and so rather than looking at them as folk forms, as some ossified pieces, one needs to be able to look at folk forms also in questions to livelihood, to their identity, to their everyday life, to how it helps them organize their worlds, to help them organize think. And so folk forms have to be looked at as vibrant, alive, meaningful things which are here and now, and not just something which is there 5,000 years back in some ways. And so therefore we need to engage with folk forms. So let's say there are folk cultures in colleges or folk forms which emerge in the universities which are unique to that space, and so therefore we need to obviously engage with all those articulations which exist.
How do you look at the future of literature in the post-theory era?
I think what we need to, I mean, I'm not very sure whether one would look at the signpost of post theory or after theory as a very significant signpost, but certainly it's a moment which allows us to probably think about the discipline and where the discipline is going. I would like to say that, I mean, we need to probably expand the frontiers of literature to be able to understand that when we say literature, we also mean all other aspects of literature, culture, all kinds of expression, which also comprise and constitute what one may, commonsensically call humanities in that sense. So, of course, we need to understand that literature in the printed form is a technology which is fairly recent. It is only 400 years old, 500 years old with the Gutenberg revolution, etc. And there's been literature which has been pre-print, and alongside print, there are all kinds of literary forms which are also oral forms which persist in some ways. And of course, post printing, there's digital forms, which is also ways in which people are writing and expressing themselves. So, of course, when we look at the future of literature, I think we need to expand the frontiers of literature and textual studies to be able to include a huge number of texts which otherwise get left out in our own imagination of dealing with literature and culture. And so, of course, we need to do that. And I'm not very worried about the health of literature and culture, because I think till there are people, till there are communities, they will always find their modes of expression. There is no civilization historically which existed in any part of the world which has not had some form of expression or the other. So you and I may not know Fijian culture, but there are Fijian people who do have their culture. Similarly, I mean, there'll always be communities and people, so I don't think we need to really worry about the health of literature and culture. I think it's in good hands. So.
Would you like to express your views on nationalism and citizenship in the present Indian context?
I'm reminded of Tagore's lectures on nationalism, which was also subsequently published. And I think one of the things that Tagore had said about nationalism is that, and of course, as you know, that he was fairly opposed to a certain sectarian, certain uni-colored idea of a nation in some ways, and he was against the principle of nationalism in a sectarian, in a narrow, insular kind of a fashion. And I think what we need to understand increasingly is that at a certain point of time where one is talking about all other ideas when it comes to globalization of finance capital or late capitalism in terms of goods and people and things and money and capital moving, at the same historical point of time we are seeing that there is this almost clamping down in all spaces of this narrow sectarian insular idea of nations and territories and things. It's happening all over. I mean, there's, whether it's the US, whether it's Brexit, whether it is building walls, whether it is Turkey, whether it is India. And so therefore, I mean, obviously this moment of nationalism where there is this fervor around this whole idea of nationalism is something which talks to a certain historical moment in some ways where this issue has become an issue in focus all over the world. Having said that, of course, while one recognizes this context, one must also understand that that nationalism at what cost? I mean, look at our own country, where there is this raging issue around Citizenship Amendment Act and over the idea of the NRC and the NPR. We've already had so many deaths in so many parts of India. I mean, is this how we imagine our nation to be? I mean, what is our imagination of the nation? I mean, do we want a nation which is only monolingual, monocultural, mono-religious, a mono-nation? I mean, India historically has never been a mono-nation. I mean, it is historic, and in my mind, the biggest strength of India is that it can never be a mono-nation, and so therefore there would always be forces which will try to impose an idea over people. It happened during the British, it has happened at different historical points of time, but none of those moments have survived, none of those moments have lasted, because the mainstay, or the way in which India has been imagined or thought or has worked itself out, is a multi-religious, multicultural, multilingual, multi-peopled, multi-ethnic, multi-food, multiple kinds of people. And so therefore there is no hemming in of such a multiplicity or such a heterogeneity. How do you possibly hem in such that into some sort of a territorial monocultural idea of a nation?
So this is my final question. Is there something you wish to say to the student community, or rather the MUS community? I mean, like a word of advice.
No, I'm not very sure whether I can give a word of advice to the students. I think all my life I've maintained that one learns from the students. You become a teacher only because of your students in some way. So, and that's the best thing about a university or a college, which is that you learn together, you grow together in some ways, and you learn so much from the young people. I mean, if you look at, let's say, young people and young people's voices today in different parts of the country, emerging from different universities, from different institutes, from IITs, from St. Stephen's to JNU to Jamia to all kinds of places, you hear such vibrant, healthy, good voices which have such ethical principles at the core of their beings in some ways, and that is very heartening for us and gives us a lot of hope for the future. And so I'm only very happy to have come to this college to be part of this particular conference, and I wish I had more time to interact with the students, but little that I've interacted with students, including you. I mean, I realized that had I spent more time, I would have learned so much more from the students here, and it's such a vibrant college, it's such a vibrant campus, and one can see in the little time in which I've been exposed to this place that this is exactly what the heart of our country is. This is exactly what represents the best part of our country, which are these places and these colleges and the young people, which needs to be nurtured and which needs to be valued and which needs to be probably learned from rather than teach to. So.
It had been a very fine talk, highly informative. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being with us.